If you've got a longer little bladed knife, that's perhaps better for this, but I'll use the little one that I would normally use for everything anyway. So off with the ends, off with the other end. I've titled this video, now here we go, I'm going to have to cut all the way through with this, so I might as well do it now. I'll cut all the way through. So I only want chunks of onion, not rings. And now that makes it a bit easier to peel off the skin, to pull those bits off. This bit's a bit manky, so I'll pull that bit off too. And there we are, there's a decent enough bit of onion. I've called it ragu rather than bolognese. It's close to what bolognese should be, but it's a more general sort of stewy thing, mincy thing that I'm making now. Chopping these into little chunks, no need to worry too much, they don't have to look pretty or anything. Cut one way, have a good cry while you're doing it if they're good onions. And there we are, half an onion. Now there should really be celery in this, but I don't use celery because too many people that moan about it. If I'm doing it for myself and I was fully kitted up, I might put some in. Ooh. I am using carrots, and the carrots I like to use are these carrot batons. They're cheap and they're partly cut. And the amount to put in is about half the weight of the onion you're using, or maybe one or two bits more if you're fond of carrots. And I'll just give these a chop into cubes. Now, as I said, you could add celery. I don't. And that's one of the reasons it's not a proper bolognese. It's a variation. And these now will be going into a pot. A big pot. Into the pot first of all goes a bit of oil. Warm it up. And carrots and onions, swirl that around a bit. No more oil than I need to in there. Bottom covered. We're going to fry those for 8 to 10 minutes. And I'm going to put a lid on as well, because if I don't, the bits at the bottom cook, the bits at the top cook, but not quite so much. So there we are, just onto a gentle fry. It's on 9 at the moment, but I am going to reduce that in a moment once it gets going properly. As usual, I'm going to use one of my favourite silicone things to do the stirring. They're coming along nicely now. They've been on for about 2 or 3 minutes now. My personal choice of mince is this. It's got 15% fat, as you can see. So it's a nice bit of beef, and when it goes in the pan, it's got enough fat in it to actually cook itself. So let's open the pack. Now, if you're doing proper bolognese, you would use half beef and half pork, but you can't get smaller packs of mince than this, so we're just stuck with the beef. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I'll put a bit of this into, you don't have to use your fingers if you don't want to, I'll put a bit of this into the warming pan and you'll see that it starts to lubricate itself. So when I push this around, you can see fat is coming out of it there, the shininess in the bottom. So this is going to produce its own fat to cook itself in. I'm only going to put about half in. You need to know yourself how much you can get away with. If you put too much in, your pan can't provide enough heat to actually cook it, because when you cook this, a lot of water can come out, and that water's got to be controlled by the heat. And what we're doing now is we're browning the mince. And this is really important because this is the time when all the flavour comes, so you really must do this. And part of the skill of browning meat is to put it in the pan and just leave it for a bit. So I'm going to do that with this. I'm going to let it actually cook on one side. It's got to get up to temperature, it's got to cook. So I'm just going to leave it like that for a moment or two. Okay, let's turn it over a bit and see what it looks like on the other side. That's nice and brown there. We could make it a bit browner, but we also run the risk of burning it, and we don't want to do that. There we go. Again, time on the other side to cook on the other side. In a moment we're going to have to decide what to do with this. Is our onion and carrot going to be sufficiently soft to add it in? And I think mine is. Yeah, I'll be able to just put that straight into there while I cook the other half. Have a look at the other side. That's nicely cooked. I'll break it up a bit. And then I'll just scrape the mince into the onion and carrot pan. Get it all out because we don't want bits getting a double cook. There we are. And by double cook I mean burn. In again with the other half. Break it up a bit. Spread it out. I'm going to wash my hands now because I'll not be handling raw meat again now. And I'll give the handles of my things a bit of a wipe too. Time to turn this over. Now the great thing about this recipe is you can add things if you want to. So you could, if you wanted to, add a bit of garlic. I'm not going to. The garlic can be nice in this. Then leave it, let it cook. Takes quite a lot of heat to get it cooked, get it brown, and you've got to give it that time. If you look at this, you can see it fizzing quite a lot. So I'm just on the edge here really, that's the water coming out of it. And I don't really want that to cool the pan down too much. So I think that's done now. There we are. That's nicely browned. And the rest of it can also go in the pan next door now. Oops. Careless. I'm not going to drop the fat in if I can avoid it. There we are. The frying is done. Let me stir all of this in. Into the pan then, a tin of chopped tomatoes. I quite like the plum ones myself, but I just take whatever I get. This is the only good thing you can do with a wooden spoon, by the way. Lift the ring pull, put that in, pull it through, and you can use it as a lever to get that lid off in a very sort of secure way. No splashing, no hurt fingers. In. And also use the same can as a measure. Half a can of water goes into. Bit of a stir, bit of a boil. Get it up to temperature now. And that's really the main bit done now. The next bit is just letting it cook. I'm going to add one or two more things. But we need to get that up to boiling point. Nice bit of boiling going on. So now I'm going to add in, it's supposed to be it's supposed to be beef stock we add, but I always add vegetable stock cubes. No one complains. Break it up a bit, spread it around. I'm going to add a small amount of, well, that's too much, isn't it? A small amount of salt. I'm going to add some tomato puree. And to try and get an idea of how much you're putting in, what I always do is this. I use the back of one of these serving things and spread out so I've got some idea how much I'm putting in. So there's a fair old bit going in there. It really does make a difference, this. It does bring out the tomatoey taste. Now on with the lid, and ideally, this is the bit you're going to hate, 2 hours to cook. So the lid goes on and the ring goes down to just a simmer. Now you could eat this straight away, it's bacteriologically safe. You could eat it in half an hour if you're hungry and it'll be alright. But to get the nice, smooth, soft taste, the best taste, 2 hours. Now I normally put my pan in the oven and put it in there, but today I'll leave it on the ring here. We'll just cook it gently here for a couple of hours and I'll come back to it then. 90 minutes in then, and I'm going to just have a look to check that it doesn't need a bit of a top up. If it's been boiling too hard, it might start to go a bit dry. Let's have a stir around. That's okay, that's doing nicely. That doesn't need anything more in. Give it a good stir, bring the stuff in from the edges. Make sure it cooks all the way through. And I'm going to give it another half hour. Because it's fairly moist, I'm going to just leave the lid off and just boil it a little bit, just to thicken that sauce up. Not too fast, just a very gentle boil. Coming up to 2 hours now, and it looks good to me. Fairly thick sauce. The mince is all nice and soft. And I better get the tagliatelle on. Largest pot you can find, half full of water. The modern way, I believe, is just to boil the water like that. But I do prefer to put a little bit of salt in just to slightly flavour the tagliatelle. And also, maybe this is just lucky oil, or I don't know. We'll put a bit of oil in, shall we, as well. But lots of people don't do that. I believe it's meant to stop the strands sticking together, the bits of pasta sticking together. I don't know how well it does. If you're using a slow ring, you might like to think of just filling a kettle, bringing a kettle of boiling water over and pouring it in the pan, just to speed things up a bit. The water's just coming up to the boil now. On the pack somewhere of spaghetti, it'll give you a time, and I suggest you set a timer to 1 minute less than that. So this is a 8-minute pack, so I would choose, this is a 9-minute pack, so I would choose 8 minutes as the time to set your timer for. There's the water boiling. And I'll drop the pasta in. The great thing about pasta is you can use whatever you like. You could have shells or butterflies or spaghetti. Whatever you fancy, stick it in there. Once it's in there, a fairly rapid boil, keep it boiling, no lid on this pan, a bit unusual not to have a lid on the pan, but no lid on this pan, and give it a single stir around. Don't keep stirring it, just stir it the once, whatever it is, and let it carry on. I'll set the timer on the ring to 8 minutes. Coming up to the end here now, I really do recommend that you try this meal. I know it's a bit of a pain having to wait all of that time and chop the onions and fiddle with the mince, fry it and all the rest, but it makes a really nutritious meal. It's a very filling meal, and it's absolutely gorgeous. The stuff in that pot is absolutely gorgeous. So if you do make it for other people, they will be impressed by it. Now I'm going to, and there we are, that's it ready. I've got a colander here, no point in facing up to nonsense with a pan lid. There's the tagliatelle ready to go. There's the mince. I've just stopped heating that as well. If you were doing this properly, you'd mix this into that and you'd then serve it like that. But the problem with that is at least half of that won't be used tonight, and afterwards I can just put that in the fridge when it's cooled down, and then tomorrow make some more pasta to go with it. I'll put some pasta on my plate here now. There we are. Oof. Not being very successful there. Very neat. The pasta's nicely cooked. There we are. And I'll mix in a bit of this. As I said, I really do recommend this to you. It's well worth it. This is absolutely gorgeous. And this pasta, if I don't eat it now, I'm just going to throw that away. It's very cheap. But the mince, first of all, cool it down without the lid on. We were using a lid earlier. I took it off to evaporate it down at the end. But then put the lid back on to protect it when it goes into the fridge, and put the whole pan in like that. But there we are. Very easy, very straightforward, very, very scrumptious indeed.